Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 171. My name is NBZ and I'm here with Bally. How you doing, Bally?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing alright. Feels like 2020 is literally the worst year in recorded history. Things are not great. Things are bad out there for a lot of people. I think, we can't in good conscience do this podcast without addressing that stuff. And I think, I feel like we make our stances pretty clear, politically on this show and who we're in support of and things like that. And I cannot abide by the horrendous things that are going on in the US perpetrated by police. Stand fully behind the Black Lives Matter protests and everything and people going out there, and just want to shout out everyone who is protesting, everyone who is donating and doing something. Even if you can't do any of that stuff, just educating yourself and reading and listening is the most important thing. We need to dismantle just the embedded societally structural racism and white supremacy that is just built into the very fabric of humanity because of history that has not been addressed in a proper way. So how are you feeling, Bally?
Totally. It is truly shocking. And the videos have just been so revealing of a part of the story that you just don't see in other media. There's something very revealing about Twitter, the ability to film what you see in front of your face and upload it. And sure, there's going to be some fake videos out there, not denying that, but when there's this sheer quantity of videos showing very similar situations just over and over, I've never seen aggression like that from a police force before, and just the consistency that it's multiple police forces across loads of cities. I'm interested if there are certain police forces in certain cities that are much better behaved than some of the stuff we've been seeing on Twitter, but I'm not getting that impression. And it's just really, really shocking. It's shocking. The response from those in power is also incredibly shocking. Scenes of Trump holding up a Bible, what is this about? What?
Basically getting the police to attack peaceful protesters to move them out of the way so he could walk across the street. Just disgusting. Right. Absolutely.
Just filthy. At this time of great crisis, we're going to fall back on horrendous symbolism and drag along loads of the whole Christianity at the same time. It's unbelievable just to see that response and sort of the complete opposite response that was shown by Obama back when obviously he was president, and it's very frustrating because it does feel like these things are going in the wrong direction, not the right direction. And I think the unity that different websites, that different organizations have shown coming out of this has been very impressive, and the speed at which it's all happened, and just the sheer strength of protesters to go out day after day in the middle of a global pandemic protesting when people are now fully aware that you are even if you're a part of the media, you're very likely to get a shield in the face, a rubber bullet in the stomach, or pepper sprayed, even if you're peaceful protesting. And that has been a common theme, unfortunately, the last week. And that is really scary, and is a really scary thing to be seeing in the United States, which has fought for so long in favor of democracy, freedom of the press, equality under the rule of law. And seeing those two things arguably evaporate in the space of a couple of weeks is unbelievable.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's evaporate. I think it's just revealing the true nature of the systems that underpin the structures of just Western society, just all society. It is truly revealing. And I think, stuff like this has happened in the past. This is not a new thing, right? Even going back to 2014 and Ferguson and things like that. But I think that as a society, we have just become far more awoken to like what is really happening, and it is. Yeah, the thing that does bring me some hope is just the way people are banding together around these causes and against, the system, because it, for the first time in a long time, feels like there is hope for some change, right? Like, I didn't feel like that with so many of these other things, but it is actually... It feels like things might happen as a result of this, and people are being persistent with it. They're not just stopping at getting justice for the murderers of George Floyd. They are going beyond that, and they're getting justice for other people and just trying to break down the system, because it's not just about getting justice for individual bad actors. It's about getting justice for the system itself and just breaking it down and rebuilding it. So
totally.
So, yeah, that's what we'll say at the start here. If you can, go and donate, if you're able to get out there and protest. But above all else, if you can't do anything else, just talk to people, educate yourself, and try and talk to family and friends and try and get over some of their prejudices as well. So,
could I plug a couple of places?
Yeah, go for it,
Bally.
Bally.
Would be good to donate. So me and Caroline were listening, and we thought these would be the best places to donate, like, money to from our position, like here in the UK. One of those is to a nationwide bail fund. So this is in the US, obviously, and that money is split across 70 different bail funds across the country, paying bails to help protesters in those communities. And then secondly, for those British listeners out there, we've also donated money to a charity called Black Minds Matter. And it's basically offering a counselling service to black people in the UK who just want to talk about everything that's going on, and so it's a bit of money towards them. So yeah, Black Minds Matter, and yeah, the bail fund that was promoted actually through Obama's website. So definitely check out his Twitter and he's got a really impressive page with just loads of things about what you can be reading, where you can be giving money, what you can be doing. Regardless of where you are in the world, and it's really good to see the real president stand up. yeah, someone who actually someone can respect. So yeah, and I donated just to the Black Lives Matter organization, the main one, but also for our listeners, obviously people like video games. There's an amazing bundle on itch.io at the moment for people on PC, where you get like 700 something games, and you can pay $5, but you can put your amount above that, and I got that as well. So there's loads of ways for you to help if you can, so get out there and do that. And now for the impossible pivot to video games and Nintendo. Cool. Well, Bally, do you want to lay out what we're going to be talking about on the show today? Yeah, so we're going to do a slightly shorter show, 2 segments this time. We're going to be talking about the games that we have been playing, and then we're going to be talking through some emails that you've written in. We should also say we are going to be talking about our next Backlog Club poll that we will talk about at the end of this episode, so look out for that. Absolutely.
Be excited. It's been a while. What was the last one? Wave Race 64 we did end of last year?
Second half of last year? I can't remember. Like October time, maybe?
Yeah, so it's been a while, so we need to get more consistent with the backlog clubs, but again, things are happening in the world. So let's talk about video games, Nintendo video games, and there was a big release that happened, even though it is a re-release. The definitive edition of Xenoblade Chronicles came out on the Nintendo Switch. And if you've listened to this show, you might know that I'm a fan of that game. just a bit of a fan of that game. And I picked it up. And I am 36 hours into the main game, and I am way further than I thought I would be for having put 36 hours into it. And I'm kind of wondering why that is. And I've heard a lot of people on Twitter as well say the same thing about they seem to be way further than they were when they first played it, despite
people
the fact
that are just better at video games in 2020 than they were in 2010.
Maybe. I don't know. And it doesn't seem like they've changed anything in terms of the pacing or anything like that. It all is the exact, this game as a definitive edition.
Loading screens?
No, the loading was even good on the Wii, to be honest. In terms of, maybe one of the things, I don't know if this is true, but maybe if you're in a pause menu, it doesn't count the timer. That's the only thing I can think of that might be a factor, but I don't know if that's true or not, because I haven't tested it. But this is very much just a visual aesthetic overhaul of the game. You see that most clearly with the character models, right? You've got an aesthetic that leans more towards Xenoblade 2, but it still has that identity of the original, right? And what I mean by that is, like, Xenoblade 2 is much more anime in its visual style of the characters, and this kind of moves towards that style, but the characters still look like they did back on the Wii, although, like, higher resolution, much sharper generally. The characters are probably the best looking revamped part of this game, because honestly the environment and the design of them is still pretty much the same. They're just been up-resed, basically, and I think that speaks to the quality of the artwork in the original, that you can kind of just go in there and make it look nicer and make it kind of stand out a bit more. And I think that's definitely, you can see the comparison videos between the Wii version. Obviously, Bally, you played the 3DS version, which I don't know what you recall of, like, how impressed were you by it and by the world playing on 3DS? Because I've heard a lot of people talking about how just the scope of it didn't translate very well to a screen like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've not really played much or seen you play much of the Wii version, so I didn't have a lot to compare it to, but I thought the scope worked fine on 3DS, and I very much enjoyed that game. I think it worked. There were some rough areas, but it didn't stand out as like a particularly rough game on 3DS. So I would argue it's one of the more impressive kind of games on 3DS, certainly in terms of scope.
Yeah, and I think it's also hard to judge when you do comparison videos on YouTube, because it's taking the low resolution 2D image versus what you would actually see on a 3DS, which is a fully 3D environment.
Yeah, we've always said 3DS games look a lot better in the flesh than they do on any kind of video online.
Absolutely, they do. So basically, I would say that overall it is a remarkable, like, upgrade to the game. And I even back then, when I came across, like, Machina Falls, for example, like, it's breathtaking. The thing that just strikes me so much, and how Monolith are so important to me as a developer, is their ability to create scope and scale and just dwarf you, just make you feel tiny in this world that is enormous, right? And I think that leads into the themes of Xenoblade and kind of more generally JRPGs of, like, hey, you're the young farm boy or whatever from the small town, and you got to go out on the adventure to conquer the world. But I think Xenoblade evokes that sense of you're tiny more than any other series that I play. It's just so good at making things seem enormous, and, like, that is to the point where, you know, when I'm swimming around Aerith Sea or whatever for the 100th time, like, you just are pushing forward forever and ever. Like, it's like minutes and minutes at a time. You are really just moving through this world at a glacial pace, and that helps, I think, with the tone of it, because it is, you know, it's a game about defying gods and fighting for revenge and things like that. It's a lot of tropey things that happen in Xenoblade, but I think the groundedness that comes from it is because its characters are so good, and it does such a good job with them. The thing that I am going to say about the visuals is there is one thing I don't think they nailed, and that is the noses. My least.
What is your favorite type of nose in video games? Why are the noses do they stand out so much?
Okay, the thing is that some of them are fine. Okay, I'm going to give you a ranking of the characters in terms of how they look versus the original. I'm very much basing this because a lot of people I've heard online are just bashing the shit out of the characters in the original, and I'm one of those people who defend them. I think with what they had to do, given the resources they had, they do such a good job of conveying emotion through those faces and having characters that look defined and different and unique. And so many people are shitting all over them, and I will not have it. I won't stand by it. Obviously, the best looking character is Ricky, because he looks the exact fucking same. He's like Kirby, right? Like, you remember the Smash Brothers Brawl trailer where they're like, oh, now Mario has denim, now Link looks all realistic, and now Kirby looks like Kirby. He just looks the same, right? And so Ricky is the same, because, you know, the faces in the original Xenoblade kind of looked like they were drawn on, like they were kind of almost charcoal or pencil on the face, right? They weren't polygonal, and so Ricky, all the Nopon characters have always been like that. In any Xenoblade game, they always look like their eyes are drawn on, and he's the exact same in this game. So Ricky obviously is the character that looks the best in terms of relating to the original game.
His nose works as well.
Well, yeah, he doesn't really have a nose, I don't think. Did Nopon have noses? I'm trying to think.
They've got to have some bit of air hole or something, you know.
They have mouths. I don't think Nopon have noses from what I can remember, but maybe I'm wrong. Dunban up next. Dunban looks fantastic. His nose is good. Like, he fits with what he looked like. Rhine also looks good. Melia is very good as well. I think Melia's nose actually works for her based on what the original was. Then Shulk. Then, bottom of the list is Charlotte and Fiora, who both do not look anything like their counterparts. Fiora, most of all, and this is the one that annoys me the most, because I love Fiora's design in the original Xenoblade. And I'm sorry, the character in Xenoblade Definitive Edition that they call Fiora does not look like Fiora at all. She looks like generic blonde anime girl, and it really annoys. It's literally my least favorite thing about the entire game is Fiora's nose. I cannot abide by it, and I really dislike the way that it looks, because it just doesn't look like her, and it bums me out a bunch.
Well, how would you like her nose to look different?
Because, like, just look, if you can show a comparison between the original.
I'm having a little look now.
Yeah, if you just go to Google and Google a comparison, you can distinctly tell how different her face looks because of it. And it's also like she has big anime eyes, which she doesn't really have in the original. So, yeah, they've kind of bastardized Fiora, and it makes me sad.
Is it more perhaps her hair that looks
different? No. I don't think so. Like, obviously all the elements will come together and create a certain thing, but anyway, that's my latest crusade against Fiora's nose. Patch it, Monolith, make it better. I'm sorry, I just can't. It's not good. But there are more things to talk about than that in Xenoblade Definitive Edition. I think the thing most of all that stands out to me is the changes to the quest design. I don't know how much, did you do many side quests when you played Xenoblade? Do you remember about that?
Here and there. I don't think I was ever particularly taken by them.
No, and neither was I. I don't recall myself going after them or doing, because there's the giant affinity tree that you can see, and you can see, like, linking all these characters, the random NPCs together, and you raise your star rating with different areas of the Bionis depending on your affinity with them. And I never got that into it, mainly because a lot of the side quests are go out and kill this monster. Go out and kill this monster and get a rare drop from it. Go out and find this random item that is a blue orb in the world. And you'll know, Bally, that when you go out in Xenoblade, they have these random orbs on the ground, and there'll be random materials that you can put into your Collectopedia, which will give you gems, or you can use them in side quests, or you can use them in the Colony 6 rebuilding, or things like that. In the original game, there was no real direction. And this is kind of the case with Xenoblade 2 as well on certain enemies, but a lot of the quests are like, go kill a Ponyo, go kill an owl thingy, go kill this, and the game just doesn't tell you where those are. It doesn't tell you a location, doesn't give you a marker on the map, doesn't do anything. The biggest structural change to the way this game works is that stuff, because anytime you get a quest, it will instantly blink on your map, here is an exclamation point, you can just go there and find that enemy, kill it, get it done with. If that enemy is holding an item you need, it will show up. If there is an orb on the ground that you need to collect, it will show up on the map. It is streamlined to the nth degree, and if you just press the down button on the D-pad, it will quick select your quest menu, and then you can just tap R, and R will automatically set that as your active quest, and it will show a blue dotted line on the mini-map that points exactly to where you have to walk to. And that shows up on the main map as well. So when we're talking about doing quests, honestly, this leans into the side of Xenoblade I like the most, which is just exploring and going and finding all the places, because one of the best things about this series is they give you XP points for just discovering locations, which I think is just a thing every big open world game should do if it's an RPG of some nature. And I don't understand why this hasn't been picked up on more, but it's one of my favorite aspects of the series because it encourages you to level up, not just through fighting random enemies, but through literal discovery. Finding secret areas in Xenoblade will sometimes net you enough XP to just level you up, which is amazing. So that's always been great. And when you add to this with these side quests, it means that as you are going, like, you get to a start of an area and you just, like, you tap through. I tap through all the fucking dialogue for the random side quests because they're like, yes, all this dialogue between characters, but all it's really saying is go kill 5 of this thing, and there's no interesting history or story behind it. There are certain side quests which do that, which do have a bit more of an emphasis on narrative, but for the most part, They're just like, okay, the MMO side quest, blah, blah, blah. I just want to collect them all so that then when I'm walking, when I'm going around, if I see an exclamation mark on the map, I can just walk over there, kill it, and that's done. The quest is like added to. So it builds into the game far more naturally and makes it so that I have done a ton of side quests. Like, I'm not going to do them all because Xenoblade has like 400 fucking side quests. It's absurd. But I have been able to just gain more experience because I have just been doing a bunch of them. And it has meant that level-wise, I've always been at a either higher level than bosses I'm going up against, which has made things much easier, or an equal level. So in terms of me complaining about grinding in Xenoblade originally, had the side quest system been better back then, I don't think it ever would have been a complaint to me, because naturally doing these side quests will naturally level you up to the point where you don't actually come up against a lot of those barriers, you know? And I think both of us complained about this when we first played the game of like, oh, there are certain bosses where you just have to grind forever to get to the high enough level. And the reality is, if you just do side quests along the way, you'll be fine. And I've heard people talk about that before, but it's just, I think this game just makes it far more appealing because the side quests are so much easier to just go out and do, which wasn't the case in the original.
Nice.
The Colony 6 stuff is the one sticking point for me, because Colony 6 is an area where eventually there's a like larger quest where you have to rebuild the entire area, and the bummer thing is that side quest doesn't work like the regular ones, because you go and you talk to Juju and he's like, hey, go and get these collectibles to build up the nature or build up the commerce or build up these different districts. And you can't set those as quests in your quest log. So basically you have to go there, read what he wants, and he's like, I need 2 ice cabbages. And you're like, where the fuck are ice cabbages? Probably Valak Mountain. So you go to Valak Mountain, you wander around, like, this is the original. In the original, you just wander around trying to find them. And it's the same here, where the only time I've had to go to a wiki, the Xenoblade wiki, is when I'm doing the Colony 6 side quests, because ice cabbages are apparently specific to 6 locations at night in Valak Mountain, and there is a 7% chance of finding one, and you need 2 of them. So, like, I spent yesterday evening, we were doing like a family quiz, and I wasn't participating as much because it was about India, and I was like, I'm not going to get any of these questions. My dad's going to answer all the questions. So I was basically sitting there like participating, but like playing Xenoblade at the same time. And I was just walking around Valak Mountain for an hour trying to find fucking ice cabbages, I tell you what. Which, like, I think that's one of the things that has made Xenoblade more approachable now. Obviously, you have the experience of playing it handheld, but, like, it's great to be able to play this game handheld. And speaking of that, the visual side of handheld is not great. It's similar to Xenoblade 2, where it's blurry. It's not quite as blurry as Xenoblade 2 is, but I wouldn't want to experience this world on the Switch handheld because the resolution is just not as popping as it should be. It looks so much nicer, like especially when you get to some of those huge areas like Earthsea and Machna Forest. Like, they are just gorgeous, and you want to soak in the visual splendor. And even though I've played the game before, like, it is great re-experiencing these areas again on a higher resolution. But there are times where I'm doing side quests and I'm like, well, I've already explored this part and I'm just doing side quests. It's great to just have it handheld, so that's been wonderful. And yeah, exploring is still fun. I think the core of this game, which is exploring all the places, environments, is still wonderful. One of the things I've discovered is that you don't have to swim around Earthsea. If you want to unlock the whole map, all you need to do is find every landmark.
What's the point of this game then?
No, I know, you're right. But this is the other reason we were discussing about why my playtime is so much lower. Maybe it's because I haven't spent 6 hours just literally swimming around every single aspect of Earthsea to open up the map so that it's fully filled in. Because I have that kind of mentality where, like, if I have a map, I need it filled in. It's part of the reason I am such a big fan of Metroidvanias, is like, I just need every square on the map filled in. I can't have any grayness. I just have to do it. So Xenoblade, like, very much grips itself into that part of my desires as well. But if you just find every location and every landmark, the map auto-fills in. And so it shows you the entire map, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I did Earthsea, and I just got the whole thing, and I'm like, wow, that probably saved me a bunch of time instead of just swimming around nonstop. So that has helped a great deal, and also, you get experience for finding all those places, so it all kind of builds in. The one thing that has been the most surprising to me is the combat of Xenoblade, because I think both of us, back when we played it, we didn't really experiment that much, right? Like, I think you played as Shulk, Ryan, and Shala for most of the game, Bally, right?
Yeah, most of it. I mean, there's certain points where you kind of need to switch them out a bit, but I think that was my core crew.
Yeah, and I think I made this comment on Twitter, but I think
Dunban,
the game,
he was important.
Yeah, Dunban. I told you to use Dunban at the end game, and yes. I used him because he's actually a much better tank than Ryan, and he deals out much bigger damage than Ryan does. But what I was saying on Twitter was, I think the game actively discourages new players from switching up the formula because Ryan and Shala are just not that fun to play as, right? Shulk is much more active because all his moves are about moving around the enemy and attacking them from different angles. And that's another thing to bring up. This combat has been so much more streamlined because, you know, side attacks and back attacks, you never knew where exactly you were on enemies. If there are multiple enemies on screen, it gets so busy with all the numbers flying and everything. This game streamlined that so much by putting a little exclamation mark next to an art when you will do the bonus damage. So if you are behind an enemy, an exclamation mark will pop up on backslash, and so you just hit it at that point and it does it. And it also pops up a thing that's like chance, so it shows
it's tricky because the start of the game, definitely, Ryan is basically the tank who has all these moves that kind of get aggro enemies to attack him, so it's kind of less fun to play as, I guess, because he's just sitting there taking all the aggro from enemies, and then Shulk is meant to like run around the side or the back and the backslash, side slash, etc.
Yeah, if you're playing as Ryan, you're basically waiting for Shulk to break an enemy so you can topple, because Ryan doesn't fucking topple people when you want him to, let me tell you that. Like, there was a fight early on in Colony 9 where I was like, all right, Ryan, I've broken this enemy like 3 times. Why are you not toppling them? What are you doing? Like, the AI still has the kind of not great elements to it, which a lot of people complained about in the original. But yeah, same with Shala. Shala's a healer, and I don't think games generally do a good job of making healers fun. I think Overwatch is one of the few games where, like, I mainly play as a healer in Overwatch. I find playing as Mercy a lot of fun, but most games do not make playing as a healer that enjoyable, which I think is why lots of people bounce off them. So those first 3 characters, and you have those guys for at least the first 10 to 15 hours of the game before you get another character. And so, like, you're mainly playing as Shulk because it's just not that engaging to play as anyone else. So as soon as you get a new character, you're like, well, I'll just keep playing as Shulk, I guess, because that was my mentality anyway. And also, I didn't really know what to do. Like, I wasn't reading things properly, and it's just taking the time to figure things out. Also, you know, over the years, I watched Chugga Conroy play through this whole game, which taught me a lot about its systems. I've watched loads of people go through the game, but mainly I watch people's reactions to the cutscenes, because that's my favorite thing about Xenoblade, is its story and its world and its characters and the twists that happen. So, like, just watching people react to those in real time, like when Ben Moore from Easy Allies played through it, I loved watching just him react to things as they happened. So it's I know this game pretty much inside out because I've seen it so many times. But there are also, like, there are smaller moments within the story that I forgot about, and there's a lot of foreshadowing, especially when you know where it's going, when you know exactly what the plot is. I love it when you can go back through media and see all the kind of chess pieces being laid almost. The Wheel of Time that I'm reading at the moment, people tell me that if you go back and reread this series, which, I mean, it's already a 15-book series, so, like, the intimidation of doing it again is maybe a bit too much. But people have said it's even better on a reread because there are so many tiny little details that are dropped in there as nuggets of foreshadowing for the future. And so, yeah, that's been wonderful to see, to, like, get that excitement of, oh, I know what they're talking about, or like, oh, I wonder what they are talking about there, because I'm not sure if that relates to this thing or that thing. So it's been fun in that way. But yeah, sorry, back to the combat quickly. Dunban, for example, I learned that his attack Gale Slash, when you use it, there are other moves in his arsenal that will then do something after you use Gale Slash. Whereas in the past, he has a green art, which usually just topples enemies, right? But in the past, when I used him, I'm like, why isn't it toppling? It's because he only topples after using Gale Slash. So you have to use Gale Slash first, then you can topple with that art. And it tells you on the screen, it tells you that. But, like, I feel I just didn't want to learn back then. I was like, I just want to get through the game. I just want to finish it and see the story, because that's what was really driving me through the first time, was the characters and the story. That's why I love the game so much. But I'm really gaining a much deeper appreciation for the combat as a result of just taking my time with it and reading things about it and learning how the characters should play. And honestly, it's just the thing with breaking and toppling has been made so much easier by the exclamation mark showing up and showing you, oh, this guy's broken right now, you can topple. Oh, this guy's toppled, you can daze him right now. And so getting those chains together and just dazing enemies and letting them stay on the ground forever and ever has been fantastic, especially when you get a character like Melia who plays completely different than everybody else. And I've heard for years and years people say how good Melia is, and I never learned her, I never understood her whatsoever. But she is phenomenal. Once you know how to use Melia, you just literally evaporate enemies. Like, their HP is just like snap and it's gone. And it's been a lot of fun playing as Melia, mainly because this version of Xenoblade Definitive Edition comes with a bonus epilogue called Future Connected, which I have finished. So basically I'm probably 2/3 of the way through the main game, but I decided I wanted to finish Future Connected so I could talk about it here and kind of give you an idea of what it's about and the differences in it. And the main reason I didn't jump into it straight away, well, part of the reason was I was like, oh, let's just check out the original for like a couple hours and then I'll jump into it. And then 35 hours later, I was like, oh, I should probably play Future Connect. It's something about Xenoblade that just like, oh, okay, well, I just started it, but now I'm just going to get drawn into it again. It just happened. It's a drug. I got addicted to it. So, but the main reason I waited after I'd done that was I was like, well, if I'm jumping into this new story and Shulk's there and Melia's there, and I know from history, from people talking about it, that Melia's AI is terrible, I want to be able to play as Melia and have the AI play as Shulk and these other Noppon who join you on your adventure. So I needed to learn how to play Melia first, which is why when you get her in the main game, I spent a ton of time looking up guides on YouTube, figuring out what you're supposed to do, how it works, what the best setup with her arts are, all that stuff. And now I know exactly what to do with her, so I jumped in, and you start at level 60 in Future Connected, because it takes place after the main game, and I had literally zero problems with any of the enemies. Like, the final boss, I completely shredded him. Like, not even a fucking question. It was just demolishing completely and utterly. And I think that speaks to how good Melia is. And she is really a glass cannon, because if she gets the aggro, you'll get taken down very quickly. Like, she is brittle as hell, but she packs a punch. And if you have a setup that works, she can do a great job. So Future Connected is interesting because it takes place on the Bionis shoulder. The Bionis shoulder is an area from the original game that was... People thought it was cut during development, but apparently, according to interviews with Takahashi, it was actually a test environment. So they made the environment as like a kind of demo test ground for all of the ideas they were doing. And it is shown in one cutscene in the original game, but otherwise people have always thought about it as like cut content. Chugga Conroy did a great video about people who got access to the game file and have run around the old Bionis shoulder. They basically repurposed this entire area, built it in a way that is more vertical to because they have definitely evolved their game design in terms of, you know, environments and how you get through places. You can see that in Xenoblade X is a very vertical game. Even 2 has much more verticality to it. So this area has been a bit more redesigned, more areas added to it, and yeah, it just basically tells the story of Melia, and her story is one of those which wasn't, like, I guess, fully completed. You could argue it was, but like Melia loses a lot throughout the main game of Xenoblade Chronicles, and it's about her leadership and her trying to bring people together and things like that. And I think overall, like, it's not a mind-blowing story, but it does a really good job of fleshing out her character more, giving her more stuff to kind of chew on. And there are, you know, certain characters who come back who are minor players in the main game, and there's some really cool things that happen. The other 2 characters you have are Kino and Nene, and they're 2 little Noppon children. And I could see people who do not like Noppon being very fucking frustrated with Kino and Nene, because they are the most like, Kino, Nene, like, hi boys, Noppon.
What is Xenoblade without Noppon, though? You gotta have them.
Exactly.
In there.
Right, they're like the Chocobo to Final Fantasy,
right.
Noppon are to Xenoblade. Like, they are iconic for the series. And the thing I really wish is that they did bring in some of the original characters, because you remember Heart to Hearts in the original game. I don't know if you ever did many. A lot of it required building affinity between characters, and if you're only using 3 characters, you'll never build affinity with other characters, so you'll never see them. But they're basically just little conversations that are not voice acted, and they have like dialogue choices where you can either, if you get the correct dialogue choice, it boosts your affinity. If you get the wrong one, it drops your affinity. And instead of Heart to Hearts, Future Connected has a thing called Quiet Moments, and they aren't based on affinity, so you don't have to worry about that. They're just gated by story progress, and they are just cutscenes, because they are fully voice acted, and they are a decent length. And the ones between Shulk and Melia are really great. Like, they're really good, more character building. the ones between Kino and Nene are kind of annoying and trite. But like there are moments of like Melia teaching Kino that he has to be a hero pawn and do certain things. Like there's good messaging behind that stuff. I just wish, because the Shulk and Melia conversation is so good, and there's also conversations that Melia has with another character that are actually really good. Like, what if Dunban was there? What if Ryan was there? What if Sharla was there? Like, I have myself wishing that instead of these annoying Nopon kids, we actually had characters we cared about. But, like, there's an arc there, and I think the focus is on Melia, and I think maybe if you hadn't had these more forgettable characters, the focus would have been lessened for her, I guess. So it does make sense. Also, the Kino and Nene are Ricky's kids, so there's lots of references to Ricky as well, which is a fun thing. But yeah, the location is great. The new music is fantastic. The overworld theme for the Bionis shoulder definitely has more of a Xenoblade 2 vibe to it in terms of the music, but is brilliant. I'll probably play that as part of the break music. The new battle theme is fantastic. Obviously, Xenoblade music, that's my favorite OST of all time. It's just phenomenal. So yeah, I finished Future Connected, and Future Connected actually teases, like, it has this enemy that it introduces, and it has this kind of this almost sci-fi element that it brings in that Takahashi has said, like, hey, this will probably tie into the future of Xenoblade. So I'm interested to see where that goes, like if it's going to connect to Xenoblade 3, whatever that ends up being or whatever. But I'm glad I played it. I'm happy to have beaten Future Connected. And now I can go back to exploring and just taking my time, honestly, with the definitive edition, because I was not necessarily rushing through it, because I actually am taking my time far more with this game, just doing all the side quests and things that I come across. But yeah, now I feel a bit more relaxed about, like, just, you know, I've seen Xenoblade before. I don't need to get to the end to see the surprise, so I don't get spoiled on it. Like, I know the game, so it's nice. And I think, especially during this time where just the world is fucking falling apart and shit is just the worst, it is so nice to have something comforting and familiar like Xenoblade to just sink into. It really is. So I'm absolutely adoring it. If you've never played the game before, this is the opportunity to jump in and play Xenoblade Chronicles. Absolutely one of my favorite games of all time, and I just have more respect for it now. You know, I replayed Uncharted 2 this year. Like, I've been replaying a lot of games, like replaying Ori and the Blind Forest on hard mode, things like that. And like Uncharted 2 is like, maybe it doesn't hold up quite as well in my estimation. I think Xenoblade is better than I thought it was. Like, and that's crazy to me, because I already held it in high regard. But like, just me gaining a deeper understanding of the combat has just increased my respect for it even more. Even though, like, there are definitely times when I've been playing where I'm like, I'm kind of just doing the same thing with every enemy when I'm playing, but it feels good because I'm destroying them. So, you know, it feels like I've mastered the systems.
Yeah, I mean, there's some very good JRPGs where that's probably still the case, right?
For sure, yeah.
So.
Yeah, cool. Great. Sorry for taking up so much time on Xenoblade, but, you know, man's got to talk about his passions. Bally. We played a game together as well. Obviously, last show I talked about Operation Logic Bomb on the Super Nintendo Switch online service. Thanks for that mouthful, Nintendo. They also added Wild Guns to the Super Nintendo online service, a game that I'd heard a bunch about in the past. It seemed like the type of thing, a co-op experience that is Contra-esque, right, would you say, in some senses?
Yeah, it's just a slightly different perspective, really, but a very similar idea. It is insta-kill, right? Co-op, blast your way through cowboys and robots and aliens and businessmen.
Businessmen, shout out to businessmen.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. So the setting feels a little bit Contra-like, but then the camera perspective is very different. It's almost like a pseudo third person kind of behind the back, but you have the ability to shoot in front.
I think the best way to describe it is that it's Duck Hunt, basically, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're facing a kind of screen in front of you.
It's Duck Hunt, but you can still move around.
Yeah, so there are two characters on the screen. I can't remember their names, whatever. There's a man and a woman, and the two of you can play online, because the Super Nintendo online is actually pretty good. Like, we used it, and it
really
worked.
Good
and
functionality. Playing online and being able to save state with each other on the same game.
Yeah, I don't know if you had the option to bring up the save state menu.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, so it was just me. So the person who's in control of the play session, which was me, I can bring up the save menu to save state. What you can't do is rewind. So you can't rewind when you're doing co-op online, or when you're playing with someone online, because you could, as we've talked about in the past, we would like to maybe go through the original Legend of Zelda together, like back and forth, trading the controls almost. And you can't rewind while you're doing that. If you're on your own, you can. But you can make save states. And here's the funny thing. I don't think we actually needed save states, Bally, because the save system in this game is such that if you die on a level...
It's very generous. It's very unlike Contra.
Yeah, for sure, because if you die on a level, it'll just send you back to the main menu, and if you'd already beaten a level, that level stays completed. So, and you have 3 lives when you start each level. Each of you has 3 lives, which makes me feel like if I was to play this on my own, it would be a lot more difficult.
Maybe you'd get 4 or 5 lives if you're by yourself. You don't know.
I feel like games back then weren't that generous, Bally. I think back then games were just easier if you played with multiple people.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So yeah, the idea is that you are just... It's a shooting gallery, essentially, but you can also move your character on the screen, which is weird because... Obviously, there's no analog sticks back then, so you're moving your reticle on the screen as you shoot. So if you hold down the shoot button, your character stands in place, and you can move the D-pad, or I was using the analog stick because it felt more natural for this type of game, to move your reticle and to shoot enemies in front of you, right? And trying to dodge out of the way of bullets that come your way by tapping to the side with B, I believe it was, to do a dodge roll, and you can also jump. And so it's a case of... Most of the time, you're kind of standing in place and shooting, but you really have to pay attention to your environment, because sometimes a bullet will come out of somewhere and just will knock you out, and you'll be like, oh, where the hell did that come from? So it's really about just being aware of your environment. And
you can dodge roll while shooting, whereas you actually have to stop shooting in order to jump. So like they do feel very different to each other. And likewise, there's even enemies who will come up and try and melee attack you, and you have to get out like a baseball bat and spank them back with your hit them with your baseball bat.
Smack them, I think, might be the word you're looking for.
Smack them, spank them, spack them, all of the above. And that can be really difficult to try and spot in the middle of a heated fight with everything going on the screen.
Totally, yeah. It's I think that by the end, I think it started off difficulty-wise really good, and then you definitely get to the train level, and we were like, okay, Superman's the boss. I hope there's not another part after Superman. There's this guy who flies through the air who's a boss, and this is the thing we do, especially with Contra, is you just come up with names for things on the screen, because you need a quick shorthand when you're panicking and you're trying to communicate with one another. And Businessman is the best one, because there's an enemy who's a boss who's literally just a guy in a suit who just walks around like an idiot, and we just called him Businessman, and we had tactics for Businessman. The other thing that you get is you have your guns. If you shoot certain enemies at certain times, you'll be able to upgrade those guns, so you can get a wider reticle or a more powerful shot, or much faster speed of fire. But you can also use bombs. You have a limited number of bombs, 3 each, I believe, but you can also collect more bombs as you go through the level. And we really got down to the tactical nature of it by the end, where the last level, there's 4 different phases to this last level, and we're like, okay, so screen 1, we're gonna use 1 bomb, and then we're gonna wait until Businessman, we'll use 1 bomb on Businessman, so we have 2 bombs left for the final boss and stuff like that. So it was really it's so much fun to just communicate and figure out a strategy,
because the skill is in your memory of the phases. It's your skills also in the coordination between you and your partner, and likewise the skills in actually carrying it out, doing the action combat that you're engaged in. Your brain is operating at very much more than just one level that you might think
for sure.
It is, which gets really heated. It gets fast. But it's really satisfying, and we did manage to beat it in about 2-3 hours. It wasn't too long.
Yeah, we just sat there. I think it was 5 o'clock, and we finished at about 7:15. So it was just over 2 hours, and it is one of my favorite Super Nintendo experiences I've had. I think it's a gorgeous game as well. It's really great sprite design, and I think the limited focus of it helps with that. There's definitely slowdown there, which can help at moments as well to kind of dodge around things, but just learning the system, because I remember we started off and we're like, what the fuck is going on? I don't understand. How do I move? How do I jump? How do I dodge? And the transformation that happened from that to the end game, where we're just mind melding, like just nailing every aspect is incredibly satisfying.
And just sort of learning how to be on the screen with each other. And what I mean by that is like, I'll take care of this part of the screen, you take care of that part of the screen. We tried not to like cross over too much because then the chaos just gets worse. And
it really gets busy. It gets busy on the screen in terms of your reticles, and sometimes not realizing you're looking at your friend's reticle as opposed to your own. You're like, oh no, I've been shooting at nothing this whole time. And they are different colors, but it's a little tricky sometimes. And there's a lot of flashing things that happen on the screen. Often before an enemy will shoot the screen, there will be like a flashing kind of circle that will be like, this is where this is going to land. You better dodge roll if you want to avoid it, and things like that. But I think for the most part, its difficulty is pretty fair. Would you not say?
Yeah, it's fair. I think that is emphasized by the fact you get all your lives back after the level. I think that's a really nice thing for this game to do. And maybe that final level, which opens with those two guys that we just couldn't not use a bomb on, which was a little frustrating, but generally it was very fair.
Yeah, because I feel like when we've played Contra before, we had to save state mid-boss fight, and we never did that throughout this entire thing. When you think about it, none of the save states we made actually made a material difference, because it was basically, we beat all of those levels from beginning to end with the amount of lives that we had. We never did a cheeky we'll just do a save state because we're in a good position here and we just don't want to repeat that section. We always, and I think by the end I was like, Bally, do you want to do a save state after these two guys? And you're like, well, would we really be beating it if we did it that way? Because I think you sense that we could do it. Like, we really could do it. So
we were there. We were just messing up a bit, and that is frustrating. But we knew we could beat the game if we brought our best game. That's the important part. That's what that's what feels fair about it.
Right, whereas some elements of Contra 3 were like, I don't think, unless we put 25 hours into this...
I don't think even our best game can actually do this.
Right. Yeah, unless we put 25 hours into this and got really lucky, we would be able to do it without save-stating our way through it, There's just a difference there, and I think, it's a short game, but it's one of those games that I think, you can just go back and replay and have a great time with still. It's just... I would highly recommend, if you have a friend who has a Switch, even in this time of, like, isolation and being at home... The online portion of that is great. I wish like these Konami collections and the Mega Man collections and things like that. Well, Mega Man less so because there's no multiplayer Mega Man, but like the Contra collection especially. Why does that not have online? It really frustrates me.
It's almost like Nintendo was so slow to get out the blocks on this functionality that's what made Konami be like, right, we've got to get Contra collection out there, and they never even... It's maybe not even Konami's fault in that sense. They just never thought that Nintendo was ever going to put Super Nintendo games on the system with online functionality, so they never thought about it at all.
And not to mention, they stand to make so much more money by selling their own products on the eShop as opposed to just getting dividends from Nintendo for people playing it on their online.
We've got to get out there, put out our collection, and Nintendo are like, well, we don't have any current plans currently, so I guess that's all good, whatever. And then 2 years down the line or whatever, and Nintendo are like, we'll throw in some NES and Super Nintendo games, sure.
Yeah, it's one of those things that makes me wish that the console companies built in a kind of almost a system-wide online functionality thing, because what Steam has done is Steam has made a thing called Remote Play Together, which basically allows you to co-op any game on Steam, even if it only has local multiplayer.
That's a good point. I mean, that sounds really cool, and I would guess that Series X and PlayStation 5 won't even have that functionality, to be honest.
No.
But it does seem like that is just the natural future of what online gaming should be.
Yeah, because it means that then the developers don't even have to build it into the game. It can just be at a system level that you can do it, Great. Anyway, Wild Guns, one of my favorite things I played this year so far. That was so much fun. I had a great time.
Cool. Well, I've been playing another game. It's a puzzle game that's on Switch, and I played it on Switch, and that is The Gardens Between. It's a short puzzle game. Very simple concept. It's two characters that essentially move around a diorama on a single track, and you control them by moving time. And the aim is that one of the characters has to get their lantern filled with light and take it to the top of the mountain, essentially. And there's like 20 different dioramas or so, 20 different mountains. And you can put this lantern down on these moving pods that move around the stage in line with time. And likewise, there are these flowers that produce the light that you then load into your lantern. And likewise, there are also flowers that take away the light. There's also like the purple smoke that you can't walk through, but it can be cleared by light. And then likewise, this purple smoke you can walk on top of, but as it gets cleared by light, you have to make sure you don't have light if you want to walk across it. So as a puzzle game, just with those mechanics alone, I think you could make a decent puzzle game that is cool and interesting. But I think what's the real kicker for this game, and I enjoyed the most, was that the other character has the ability to interact with all the other aspects of the level. So each level will have like a unique object. So the two characters, the game is basically based on their friendship and the rooms and experiences they have living. They live together. It's not really clear.
They live next door to each other, right?
Next door to each other.
Not to spoil the ending, but like you see that at the end, that their houses are next to one another.
Right.
And yeah.
So objects like, I don't know, calculators, rolling pins, TV remotes, televisions. I think there's like board games and
dripping water that has to be applied to electricity to create, certain elements.
So my favorite use of an item was actually a calculator that they both walk across, and they walk across a specific series of numbers. And then a code appears later in the level, and you think, all right, I guess I have to match that code with the number I put in on the calculator. And you have to do a very specific walking them through time and backwards and back again in order to get them to hit the right numbers in order to unlock the later part of the level. And it's just like this really awesome, innovative, and it's not. Another reason I really love this game is that it's a really good difficulty. Like I only went to a guide like just a couple of times at the very end, and I think if I had just been a little more patient, I might have got it. Like I never had to go to a guide like maybe halfway through the game or anything. Like it's fairly simple. It's fairly not straight. It's tougher than being straightforward. It makes you think.
Right, because like ultimately it's one of those games where you feel super clever for having done it, and yet the simplicity with which you're able to solve the puzzles it's so clear. Like it's so like there's a real smoothness to your solving of them, but also they're clever enough to where you feel like a real genius for overcoming them. It just strikes a great balance.
Right.
And I think when I spoke about it on the show, I think last year, the thing that stood out to me was it gates you off. So you'll get through a part of the stage, then there'll be a point where it doesn't let you rewind past. So you'll get past an area and you're like, oh, I can't go further back, which lets you know that all the tools you need are within this small stretch of the level, because you literally can't access that previous part, which limits the scope, and so it makes it more tangible for you to find the solution, because you're like, well, there's only certain few things I can do. I can figure this out, essentially.
Yeah. And there are certain levels where you do almost have to go back to the beginning of the level to interact with something that then links to the end. And there are more complicated aspects, but
yeah, certainly does.
I do think it also has areas where you're sort of lining up this something that happens on a screen that links to the real world. It feels a little bit Gorogoa-esque in some ways. And I actually think it's stronger in that it's a lot simpler, where some of the most revealing aspects of Gorogoa can be very complicated to get to. And like I've definitely struggled with that game with kind of working out, right, so how does this link to that? Whereas this feels like there's fewer steps to get to the eureka moments, really. And yeah, it's just on top of the design being so strong, I think that just artistically it's a really lovely, almost pastoral colors, artwork that is just really lovely to like play and experience. And the music is very kind of, it's piano, it's just little plinky plonks. It's almost like a suggestive piano based soundtrack, a bit like Breath of the Wild or something. It's just kind of suggestive but not overbearing.
It's like very sparse in a way.
Very sparse. And that lets all the objects and things that you're interacting with kind of breathe a lot more in terms of the sounds that they're making and that sort of thing. So it's only like a 3 to 4 hour game in total, and I played it in sort of one sitting. I sort of started it at the TV, and then the joy of Switch was I brought the end of the game to bed and then beat it in bed, and and that's just a great way to play a short game on Switch. But it's I'd say like 3 to 4 hours long, and I've not really had a puzzle game that has been my, go to. This is my favorite puzzle game ever. I mean, it might have been Box Boy initially, but I definitely didn't get tired of it necessarily, but just kind of slowed down on my appreciation for that game after like the sequels, and kind of like, it's a very long game. I think this game is so strong partially because it's so short, and is probably now like my favorite puzzle game. Like, this is a game that I would be the most comfortable recommending to someone. I think you do need a bit of a gamer brain mindset to play this game, but probably less so than a game like a Box Boy, obviously. But it's a game I definitely recommend. I know that it's like on Game Pass. I know it's across everything. It's fairly cheap. I got it on sale for maybe like £3-4 on Switch a while back, and definitely look out for it. And
I heard the Switch version is very good as well. How did it run handheld and on the TV and things like that?
Yeah, it did. It was flawless, no hitching. There's a little bit of loading screens here and there, but that loading is, it's kind of like, there's nice stuff to look at while it's loading. It's not like just a black screen or something like it.
Sure.
It's a great package, and this was one of the ones you recommended, MBZ, and I'm glad I played it and picked it up, because
for sure. And I think when I recommended it, I was like, I think this will be the one that Bally like connects with, because there have been a lot of puzzle games where I'm like, this is the great second coming of Christ. Like, for me, I would say Gorogoa. I don't know. I think both these games are remarkable, actually. Like, honestly, the Gardens Between is just...
Yes, they very much are.
Just impeccable, but I think it is definitely much more approachable for a lot wider audience.
I have huge respect for Gorogoa. It's just more my personal taste kind of puts me off it.
For sure.
This is very much more up my street, personal taste-wise. The Gardens Between, highly recommend it. It's like a small Australian developer, I believe. I can't remember their name off the top of my head. Wonder what they'll work on next.
And also I just wanted to shout out to the story, because I think it has a nice little ending, and it kind of makes sense with what has been going on throughout the whole thing. Like, it's simple, but it works, and I think it's pretty clever.
Really cool little game.
Great, fantastic. Go check out video games. Video games are good. And yes, we will be back. That will end out this segment. We'll be back after the break to chat some of your emails. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Alright everyone, welcome back to the second part of today's show. It is the emails segment. It's my personal favourite. I think it's a good one. If you would like to send in an email to the show, please send them to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. Or you can post a comment in our Discord server. We've got a great community growing over there. We'd really appreciate your feedback, your questions. We'll read them out on the show. Our first question today is from Brad B. He's from Queens in New York. Hi, fellas. Love the show. Love Codename Steam. Here's to being on the right side of that part of history.
Yes, Brad, I stand with you.
Want to ask your thoughts about the likelihood of release of the following games on Switch in the near future. Well, let's list these one by one, right? First game, Street Fighter 5.
So we're just going to say like percentage chance of this coming to the Switch.
Yeah, let's do percentage chance.
Man, Street Fighter 5. Okay, so like I would expect them to put Street Fighter 4 on the Switch, which they kind of did. They did like that weird...
Which one was on 3DS?
They put Street Fighter 4 on 3DS. Yeah,
4,
that was the one they put on 3DS.
Right, okay.
So you'll remember at the launch of Switch, they actually had a version of Street Fighter 2 that they put on Switch that had that weird first-person mode where you push the Joy-Cons to do a Hadouken. I remember watching, I think, Ben on Giant Bomb try and do a motion control Hadouken and it just being very bad. So, yeah, I mean, fighting games, there have certainly been some fighting games that have come to Switch, but I think for me, Street Fighter 5 is one of those games that actually, it didn't have a big impact. Like, it was kind of flopped when it came out by the community. They weren't a big fan of it. They've continued to do content for it.
What year did it come out?
I think it was like 2016 or 2017, maybe? I'm not sure. It was a few years ago now, but maybe it was even 2018. Who fucking knows? Like, certain games, you feel like it's been like decades since they came out, but actually it was like, oh, that came out earlier this year? Yeah, I forgot because it was like panned to hell. Like, the end of last year where they're like, oh, Anthem came out this year. I was like, Jesus, that feels like 10 decades ago. But for Street Fighter 5... like, they continue to do the seasonal content. They definitely have characters dropping. It feels like one of those games, though, that doesn't fit to the Nintendo model of, like, it's more of a games as a service type thing, right? Even though Smash Brothers is a similar idea of, like, doing that stuff, those types of games tend not to come to the Switch, generally. Just because they have to work on the multiple versions of it and make sure it runs.
We should say, Brad says, chance of it coming to Switch in the near future. So, like, I would define near future as next 2 years. Like, I think in 2 years' time we'll be well into probably the second half of the Switch's life cycle, you'd imagine. And there's probably still going to be a few big hitters after 2 years' time. But I think in the next 2 years, you'll be likely to get, if it's going to come, it's likely going to be in the next 2 years, potentially. So, yeah. What percentage are you going for?
I think Street Fighter 5, probably about 30% chance of that coming to the Switch. Like, I wouldn't rule it out because I think it can certainly run on the system. You look at the visual style of it, and it's not too far removed from 4. I think it's part of the reason it didn't really stand out when it came out, because it's like, it kind of looks like 4 again. Like, they didn't really visually distinguish it. It's kind of the New Super Mario Brothers problem, even though, like, Street Fighter 4's art style is much superior to New Super Mario Brothers, but you know what I mean. Like, it wasn't really a fresh coat of paint. So yeah, I don't feel like, I think about other fighting games like Soul Calibur 6 and stuff like that, and I thought at one point Namco might bring that to Switch as well, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Those games have been out for a while now, and it doesn't seem like the type of community that would rally around fighting games is really going to be on Switch. And the thing on Switch, obviously, is any fighting game you put out there is instantly competing with Smash Brothers, and it's always going to lose to Smash Brothers, right? So yeah, it's hard. I don't think it's that likely.
I know very little about fighting games, but I would probably go even lower, like 20%. And if you've not had it yet, who knows?
Sure.
Persona 5 in the next 2 years on Switch.
Oh, God. It's like the eternal struggle that people have, isn't it? They're like, will it, won't it, will it? At this point, after all the scramble nonsense and P5S and people being like, it's coming, Switch is happening, finally. So there wasn't a representative from Atlas who came out and said something along the lines of, hey, like, if you want it, like, make your voices heard and we'll, like, relay that back. But
you
honestly,
can send it to this Sony executive's email address here.
Yeah, no, it would more be to talk to Atlas about it rather than Sony. But I
just mean it seems like they've got a huge deal wrapped up with Sony and they're not breaking that for hook or crook or anyone. Like, it's not happening.
Pretty much. It feels like Sony is just bankrolling the fact that the mainline Persona series stays on PlayStation, is associated with the brand of PlayStation, and almost is treated like a first-party release, right? So, yeah, I'm going to give you a 5% chance just to give you some hope, but really that's all I'm going to give you. I'm not going to go beyond that, because, like, I've been too badly beaten up at this point. Like, wishing for Persona 5 on Switch is not going to happen.
I'll go like 10%. I think it's very unlikely, but
yeah, it's low. It's low, slim chances.
GTA 5.
Oh man, this is the one that I think should have come to Switch like at least 2 years ago.
It's maybe the weirdest, that it's not already made it, because we had LA Noire came, and then are there any other Rockstar games on Switch?
I don't believe so. They haven't put Bully. Bully would make sense. Bully was on Wii. Like, there's a pre-existing history there. Rockstar have had a history of working with Nintendo in the past. You don't look about like Chinatown Wars on DS, which was, a lot of people call that one of the best GTA games, right? So they have done stuff with Nintendo. GTA 5 is the biggest fucking game in the world. You know, it sold so many stupid amount of copies. It's not like Rockstar don't want to sell more, but it's the question of, do they care enough? And like at this point, they're ramping up for GTA 6. Is that a port that gets done in-house? If they were going to do it, they would likely, farm it out somewhere to some other developer who would do it, like who would get it sorted. The other thing you have to realize, right, the fundamental core of why GTA 5 is still relevant, it's an online game. And as I said before, with Street Fighter, with stuff like Division, with all these big like Rainbow Six, all these Ubisoft style games of constantly updated, Rainbow Six Siege, all this nonsense, GTA 5 lives and breathes via shark cards and its online functionality and its ability to play with people in a giant world and have everything work perfectly flawlessly. Obviously, like, it has issues. It's not a smooth experience necessarily, even on the big boy consoles.
Like, I think they'd be prepared to port it to Switch. I don't think they'd be prepared to put in the online infrastructure, because it's just too difficult to work with. Like this, like Nintendo, the Switch is just like poorly like operational from an operational perspective on online stuff. It's just not gonna work well, is it?
Yeah, no, and I do worry about like popular. Obviously, like you've done open worlds on Switch before, and GTA 5 is a last-gen game at its core. It came out on 360 and PS3, and fundamentally the Switch is kind of similar architecture to those consoles. It should be able to run most of what PS3 and 360 could, but also like you need to wonder about how that would run with people online. I just take one look at Pokemon Sword and Shield and how as soon as you populate the wild area with more than like 3 people, the frame rate becomes like 12, And GTA 5, far more ambitious game than Sword and Shield, like far more open, and you think about how many players you'd have online at the same time, I just don't think it's feasible. So yeah, like Rockstar could put out regular GTA 5 and then just not do the online stuff, but then what's the point from their perspective of putting it there?
I mean, we've had Saints Row. Is it more physicsy based than a Saints Row? Because that's been ported to Switch, right?
Yeah, it has. And what we've seen is Saints Row doesn't run amazingly on Switch, right? It's not a fantastic port, and that would presumably be the same with Grand Theft Auto. So it's, it's one of those that I think could work, but like you look at a lot of recent stuff that's happened. What was the one recently? There was one that I think it was The Outer Worlds just came out on Switch, and my god, does that look like complete garbage as a Switch port goes. It frame rate is bad, resolution and textures incredibly blurry, just doesn't run or perform how you need it to. It's a constant struggle, and so GTA 5, yes, it would probably do better than Outer Worlds just because it's a last-gen game, and so probably asset-wise and things like that, so it's a little less straining. But I still don't think it's that likely, because it's a lot of factors, right? It's the online stuff, it's the fact that we're so late into the Switch life cycle, it's the fact that Rockstar really, their bread and butter is made on shark cards and digital services, and if you don't put that in the Switch version, like, sure, you're making money from $60 sales, but is that really what Rockstar wants to do with their time? Because I think as a corporation, they have shown that really they just care about making hand over fist cash, which, most corporations do. So I'm going to give it like a 20% chance, just on the off opportunity that they put the regular base version on Switch without any updates or online or anything of that sort.
Yeah, I'd go 40. I think that like because Saints Row is on there, it's doable, and it's just about whether it's in the interest of Rockstar or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Final Fantasy VII Remake.
0% chance. There's no fucking way in hell that is coming to the Switch. Unfortunately.
It will come to like PC and Xbox though, right? That's going to happen in the next couple of years.
Yeah, so it has a kind of a limited time exclusivity deal on PlayStation currently. There will be a PC version. I think it's coming to Xbox as well, probably. But yeah, it's not going to be for another year. But
Final Fantasy VII Remake Chibi on Switch.
Pocket Edition? Yeah.
Exactly.
You know what?
It's happening.
Fucking what? Square Enix are dumb enough to do that shit. You should have made that bet at the start of this year, Bal. It's like, bet for November 2020, Square Enix will release Final Fantasy VII Remake Pocket Edition on Switch.
It's happening.
That's a good
Final
call. I like that.
Fantasy VII Remake Pop.
Yeah. I'm going to go so far as to say that's a 70% chance of happening this year. Final Fantasy Remake Pocket Edition is coming to the Nintendo Switch. But yeah, 0% chance of the actual game coming. No, not. I hope in hell.
Yeah, I think it's just, that game is a very graphically intense piece of art that I think.
Man, for God's sake, they can't even load the door textures properly on PlayStation. Like, what do you think the Switch version's going to look like? My lord.
Yeah. It's not happening. I'll go with 0 as well. Okay, and second, do you expect any of the following Nintendo titles in the near future? Again, why don't we say next 2 years?
Okay.
Xenoblade Chronicles X.
Ooh, I don't think X is coming. I think they've talked about it enough of like people saying, well, really? We should port it, well, we should not. The thing is, I think Monolith did the definitive edition in-house for Xenoblade 1, so I would imagine that Monolith would have to do their own work on X if they wanted to bring it over. And fundamentally, I think that studio works on a lot of stuff, right? They're part of the Zelda team. They're working on Breath of the Wild 2, undoubtedly. They are working on a sequel to Xenoblade 2, and they have that other project, which like people have speculated about, the medieval fantasy artwork. So if you think about 3 projects currently they're working on, it doesn't leave a lot of room for them to work on a port of Xenoblade Chronicles X, unless, of course, as I said, give it to someone else, give it to Grezzo or something, but doesn't seem likely to me that is coming in the next couple of years. I think Nintendo want to push forward with the mainline Xenoblade series as opposed to X because, as you've seen, 2 did extremely well, and now Definitive is linked to 2, right? They're in the same kind of ballpark, versus X, which is more of a side story. Like, it's a complete offshoot. It's not in the same realm, and it's not really existing along the same kind of ideas. So I would like it to be there because it's a great fucking game, but no, I don't think so. I'm not going to give it a high chance. I'll say, I'll give you a 10% on it, just cause.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit surprising we might not have already had it already. It was maybe one of those games you think could have come out very early on Switch and just never obviously made that slot. So yeah, I think very low. I go 5%.
Okay.
Arms
not great
2.
odds we're getting here, by the way. Just like all across the board, we're like, nope, not happening. Very positive show we are.
Arms 2. I think it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably go 50%. I would say it's a 50-50 on Arms, just because the first one did all right. It was fine, also not well positioned in terms of sales potential. To some degree, it was high sales potential because it was one of the first Switch games that came out after launch, but it was also sandwiched between Mario Kart, and there was another game that came out after it. Splatoon, yeah. It was Splatoon 2 and Mario Kart was sandwiched between 2 games which the online communities for are much larger and much more long-lasting. And ARMS is another game that was very much positioned as an online-focused thing. Didn't really grab on, unfortunately.
I really don't know what they would do to that game. Like whether it's just more characters, more stages, more modes.
I think they just need to make a single player campaign that's interesting and focuses. Yeah. Like, this is the thing that a lot of people were talking around when ARMS launched, is Overwatch had come out relatively recently. Like, it was 2016 was Overwatch and ARMS came out in 2017. And people are talking about how those characters in Overwatch are so memorable and the lore behind them, and they built so much stuff around those characters, and then the single player for ARMS didn't take anything from that. It didn't build around it. It didn't give you any interesting tidbits. Like, there was kind of, it was a canvas that could have been painted upon, but it was left blank, and like they looked cool. I like Twintel, I like Mechanica. All these characters look great, but there's no kind of meat on the bone. They're just like, hey, they look cool, now what? And I think that you could do more of a story-driven campaign that would flesh out that world and those people and make something interesting out of it. But again, that's not Nintendo's strength, right? Like, they're not in the business of creating memorable, storylines and those types of things. So,
did you go for 60%? Did you say?
I would say 50-50. It's higher percentage probably chance because they're putting a character in Smash Brothers, and that instantly raises your clout. Not that it means anything, because like Captain Falcon has been in Smash Brothers for years, and we've not seen a whiff of F-Zero for.
It can mean everything, or it can mean nothing. You know.
Sure.
It's kind of a double-edged sword in that way. I think 60%. I think it's sold fine. I think you're right. I think a single-player focused campaign could convince people, certainly like me, who are not convinced by the first game, to be like, hey, actually, this could be fun, even from a single-player perspective. Punch-Out.
Boy, I would like to see a new Punch-Out, but then you question of, is that treading on Arms' territory, right? Do you want to put out 2 punching games with punchy people in it? Which is not above Nintendo. And
while they are both punchy games, they are very different.
They are very different, yeah. You're right.
And that Next Level game on Wii that we played last year was an absolute blast.
It was great, yeah, it's fantastic.
I think that you stick to the basic controls on Switch, and you could... I think we talked about some of the stereotypes and how that game came out in 2009, and we agreed that even since 2009, I think, you know, the world is a lot more aware of those things, especially sort of in the West, and wants to, you know, maybe not tread on all those difficult subjects again. But then you could just make it a lot more, I don't know, Nintendo themed, and not even go for national stereotypes and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to say a good percentage chance of this, but I think Nintendo, when it comes to their older franchises and bringing them back, it really is just a flip of the coin. I'm gonna give it like a 35 to 40% chance. I think it's definitely a part of their lineup that is potentially missing that could be filled in, but again, it's been a while, and you also have to think about, with all these questions, who is making it, right? You have to think about what resources are being put towards which studios want to make what they want, and what's going to be the kind of the place you go forward with it. Because you look at Next Level, Luigi's Mansion made a lot of sense because that first game sold a ton on 3DS, and, you know, surprise, surprise, 3 is a remarkable game. It was so much fun. And they made the original Punch-Out, and I don't know how well Punch-Out did on Wii. I just don't know if it was sold enough to where it would warrant bringing it back. And, you know, they're also a studio that has a history of working on older Nintendo IP and bringing them back from the dead, so maybe Nintendo give them a different thing to work on this time. Who knows? But I'm excited to see what they work on next, because, you know, Luigi's Mansion 3 knocked out the park. Yeah. What a game.
I'd probably go for like around 20% to 30%, I think. Decent chance happening, but maybe not, just because I think it's difficult territory. Mario Golf. I 90%, and I honestly think like 90% in the next 2 years. Like, I think Mario Golf is one of those sports Mario games that gets a bit more love, certainly, than tennis, I would argue, historically. It's obviously nowhere near Mario Kart, but it's probably the next biggest after that when you think about it. And I think based on that,
I would say Party is probably higher than it.
But a Party is not a sport.
It's a spin-off, you know. I'm talking about spin-offs.
I'm talking about sports, but yes, you're right. Party is bigger in terms of sales. I think golf does have its fans, and I do think it's a decent game that they can put out. I don't know who'd make it. Probably Camelot. I think, did they make the 3DS one?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what Camelot are working on right now. Is one of those. Like, so, they made their tennis game for Switch. What are they going to do next? Golden Sun, people will cry, but of course that's not going to happen. That's too irrational for Nintendo to do.
So I think it's happening. Definitely. Probably not this year, but I think strong chance next year, and if not the year after, definitely within 2 years.
I'm going to say 80%. I think it is very, very high likelihood. And as you said, probably next year. I would say like a spring next year release. It would make sense to do it this year if they're doing all the Mario celebration with the new Paper Mario and the collection and stuff. But I think it could slip, and it could potentially be... Well, when did the tennis game came out? That came out in 2018, did it? I think so. So it's been 2 years. So let's say give them a little bit longer, probably 2.5 year development cycle on a golf game. Yeah, I'd say early 2021 is probably likely. So high chances.
Advance Wars.
I'm sorry, Valley. Intelligent Systems doesn't care about you anymore, and there's no other company who's going to do it. Like, Fire Emblem is too popular. I'm going to give you a 2% chance, but that is honestly being generous.
Yeah.
just the resigned sigh of someone who...
I was up for that Wargroove sequel. That'll be good. That's a better... Yeah, why don't we get excited for that? Why? I don't know. I've given up on Advance Wars at this stage. I think it's honestly more likely we see Wave Race, F-Zero, Nintendogs. I think all these other Nintendo franchises are probably more likely at this stage than Advance Wars. And that's mainly due to the fact, as you said, that Intelligent Systems are the Fire Emblem company. Fire Emblem is now a very precious property within the Nintendo tent. And
I mean, not only that, but they also make Paper Mario, right? Like, they make a lot of franchises, beloved franchises for Nintendo. So
yeah, so I don't think that dichotomy is changing anytime soon, unless Paper Mario is a massive flop followed by the next Fire Emblem being a massive flop, and even then I think that they'll still probably be moneymakers.
Yep, most likely.
But yeah, that was some good questions there, Brad B. Really appreciate those. A little quickfire round. So our next question is from Capsule J, who's from Georgia in the USA. Dear Bally and MBZ, when looking at my go-to list for the past few years, I've come to the realization that with the exception of Nintendo first-party titles, I haven't paid full price for a game in several years. In many cases, I've barely paid anything at all between giveaways on Twitch Prime and the Epic Store and the cheap subscriptions like Xbox Game Pass. Do you think this is a bad sign for the industry or just the new normal? Do you think Nintendo should create some sort of Game Pass-like service? What do you think it would or should be like, knowing that it would be an internet-based Nintendo service? What kind of horrible caveat do you think Nintendo Game Pass would come with that all us Nintendo fans would have to begrudgingly accept? Thanks for your always thoughtful analysis and amusing banter, Capsule J.
Thanks, Capsule J. I like that you can tell someone's a Nintendo fan when they're resigned to the fact that, how about this, think about this positive thing, how's Nintendo going to fuck it up, basically?
and you're going to accept it even though they've screwed it up. Just
totally. Like, that's why we love them, really, is because we know that that's inevitable. So it's interesting that he brings this up because I think about it and... since I got a PC, I have always bought stuff on Steam. I've always been like, a Steam sale, get excited for the Steam sale, let's buy it. I remember the first Steam sale, I spent 50 quid and I got like 35 games. And I was like, this is a steal. This is crazy. What the hell? It's insane. PC gaming's crazy. And I can't remember the last time I bought a game on Steam at the current moment, which is pretty ridiculous because sales happen all the time. Games are so cheap on there. And yet... we have entered this era where the Epic Store has become a force and it is just giving games away for free. Like, as long as you just pay attention, you just log in every week, click a button, and it's owned on your account. I know people have their problems with the Epic Store, but like, I literally don't understand why people are angry at them when you can just go there and get free games.
And how do they run that as a profitable business? Is this just because Fortnite is bankrolling the entire thing and they're trying to improve market share, or is there more going on?
Pretty much Fortnite makes more money than God, and so Epic have the wherewithal to where they want to take away as many Steam customers as possible, right? They want to build their own ecosystem because once people start buying games through their store, then they get revenue from people buying there. But also, Epic have been very developer friendly in terms of making publishing deals recently. They started, I think Playdead are on that list of doing a publishing deal with Epic. And also the percentage split that you get is more in terms of like far more favoring the developer than on Steam. On Steam, I believe it's like 70% something that you get versus Steam's 30% take, and then Epic have like high 80s. It's like 88% to the developer. Like Epic takes 12%. So they are very, very much going for the throat when it comes to Steam. Obviously, people are just angry and annoyed because it's the internet, and so people are like, I hate Epic for no rational reason, because whatever, and they think that, I don't know, I just don't tend to engage with people like that. There are definitely valid reasons, and obviously the Epic Store will get better, and they'll add all the features that Steam has, but I just don't understand it when they are being so positive towards development. Obviously, I don't want to say Epic's necessarily a good company, because they have had a lot of stories about terrible crunch and really bad stuff with Fortnite in terms of trying to get all of that content out on a very strict schedule, and it's part of the reason Fortnite's so successful is because they have that kind of constant churn of stuff, always fresh, keeping the community engaged, but it's not been good for their workers, from what people are told. So, like, I'm not saying Epic is good, far from it. They're a corporation like all others. They have horrible business practices, etc. But they are giving away free games every fucking week, you know? And I would be stupid to not go there and just take them, right? They're there for the picking. Additionally, as you mentioned, Twitch Prime, which is another resource that you just get games every month, just games as long as you're subscribed. Obviously, you have to think about this in terms of, yes, a lot of these services you're subscribed to. Game Pass is a thing you're paying for every month, but I think the mental gymnastics that goes on in your head is much more the case of, okay, well, Owlboy and Night in the Woods are on sale on Steam. They're 10 quid. Should I buy them? Or is there a chance that in the future this will be on Game Pass? Do I really need to play these games right now? Not really. Like, I will play them eventually. They'll probably be on Game Pass. How about I just wait and see? And it's created an approach to my habits where I just, even if something is like super cheap on Steam, I'm not necessarily going out of my way to get it. First of all, because I have a stupidly large backlog in the first place. And not that that stops me buying games anyway, because I'm an idiot and I'll do that regardless. But because, like, maybe it'll show up on one of these services. There might be a Humble Bundle in a couple of weeks. Who the hell knows, right? And so because games are constantly just, like, falling into my lap through no even chance of me trying to get them, it just doesn't make sense anymore for me to just buy games on Steam. And it bleeds over, right? You think of something like Streets of Rage 4 that came out on Switch, and like I probably would have preferred to play it on Switch, like sit on the couch, like play it while someone's watching TV, but it's just free on PC Game Pass. So either I pay 20 quid or I just play it as a part of my £4 a month subscription. What makes the most sense financially? Obviously the latter. So it definitely has affected my buying habits, and I think that is interesting, especially because you look at pricing on the Switch eShop in particular, especially in the UK, where it's not only higher than all other storefronts, but like we get screwed over on the regional pricing as well a lot of the time. So it's a whole mess. It really is, and I think it's a very astute observation from Capsule J to say, like, hey, look, man, do people even buy games anymore? Because I think the industry is starting to move into this direction. You look at Microsoft, especially with Game Pass, and they're basically saying, just don't even buy our first-party games, man. Just stay subscribed for the rest of your life. And that's more valuable to them because they have consistent revenue they can rely on as it goes through.
Totally.
So yeah,
I do think there's a big divide between PC gaming and console gaming, and I do think that that's why services like Game Pass are quite revolutionary in a way where it is moving more gradually to that almost PC-like model. Well, it's not even PC-like model. It's just this subscription model, and you are paying, I'm paying £8 a month for my Xbox Game Pass, and that works out as what, £72 a year. No, I've not done the maths wrong.
I don't know. 8 times 12?
88, 90, 96 pounds a year. That's already roughly the same price as that's a Halo Infinite and an Ori and the Will of the Wisps day one already. Like, if you bought those two games day one, say they were 50 quid each, that's 100 quid. Like, that's already what I'm going to be spending on, say, Last of Us Part 2 and Final Fantasy 7 Remake. So, like, you're already getting value as long as you're playing 2 to 3 to 4 big first party, any other games on Game Pass a year. You're already getting your value. And then likewise, it's just matching up. Have I played enough games that make up £8 per month? And always so far in the time I've owned it and been subscribed, the answer is yes. And I think that is quite unique to console gaming, where there aren't, yes, there's PS Plus, yes, there's PS Now, but outside of those, there's not really the same access to free games and to like Humble Bundle and to Steam sales. And it's where something that honestly I think the Switch eShop is getting a lot better just for having lots of sales on lots of games that are reduced by 70-80% sometimes, that you're paying like just a few quid for some really quality, more so indie titles, although even the Nintendo first party games are going on sale occasionally for smaller amounts generally, but sometimes they are also on for big sales, maybe excluding like the big, I mean, even Breath of the Wild was on sale a while ago, right? It was reduced, which is...
Yeah, Breath of the Wild, I think you can get it for like 40 quid, which like for that is pretty ridiculous from Nintendo. So
the culture of sales, buying lots of games, buying cheap games has bled over, you could even argue, from PC gaming into console gaming in some ways.
Totally. Like, even during the PS3 generation, there were fire sales. Like, you go to the PSN on PlayStation 4 these days, and literally every week there's some kind of sale under some banner of, like, it's the spring cleaning sale, it's the this sale. There's always a sale happening, and they brand it however they want to, but it's the same on the eShop, right? There's games on sale all the time. And talking of free games, there's often games that are just free on the eShop, or even, like, so cheap that they're basically, you get the money back. Sometimes you can get a game for 1 cent or 1 pence, and then you get the 1 pence back in gold coins. So you've practically spent nothing on the game anyway.
A service like Game Pass is almost like a reaction to those fire sales. Like, it's saying, actually, we can structure this slightly differently, and rather than you just buying this, buying that, getting a free game here, getting a free game there, why don't we just make this a subscription service and you get access to all these games? And actually, when we've done the maths ourselves, we'll make more money than we're currently making, and likewise, you'll feel like you're getting a decent deal, and 90% of the time you more or less are getting a decent deal, and that is based on the launch lineup, and it is obviously to do with expanding their market. And Microsoft, Xbox, they are behind in the whole console war race at the end of this generation, and they want that market share as large as possible. They've been saying incredible stuff going into Series X about expanding their market share through Game Pass, not having exclusive games to Series X for the first 2 years. Like, that's a big deal to say, hey, we are standing by Game Pass. We want this market share, and we're not letting up. And that is exciting because it is so different to what Sony are offering. And sure, they've got PS Now. It's almost like them just dipping their toe in. And it came out recently, like, they've got, 2 million users on PS Now versus Xbox's 10 million on Game Pass. Like, right. It is clear that Xbox are thinking about this going into the future. And it feels like we are going to move to these subscription services more. And as a result, there's a chance that, like, you might see individual buying of games and sales drying up a little bit more than it's kind of like we're in this transitional period where I think you're getting the benefits of both aspects. I think one of those aspects is going to dry up, and I'd put my money that we're going to be slowly moving a lot more to these Game Pass style models before we reap all the benefits of these sales for the next 4 years. Having said that, I think Nintendo are on an island by themselves.
Oh, of course, they always will be, and they'll always march the beat of their own drum and do their own thing. Like, you could argue that potentially with xCloud coming and Game Pass being tied into that, could we see that on Switch in the future? Always speculated about. I don't know whether it makes sense for Nintendo, if they would even allow it, because fundamentally that would break their own ecosystem, right? It would mean that instead of you buying, I don't know, Streets of Rage is the example I used, on the Switch eShop, you would just go to the xCloud app and just play it via that instead, right?
And I question how much the word ecosystem is even, or even the Japanese for ecosystem, is even used in Nintendo discussions and development, because when you actually look at what they offer individual games, and yes, they've done some incredible deals with indies, and the Switch is the king of indies right now, and that's great to see. But you think, how do these games link together? How do they transition? Am I, as a Nintendo user, getting the best deal? And you think when you compare it to what Microsoft is saying, they are leagues and leagues and leagues away from creating an ecosystem, like stuff like trophies, these things, like, they are leagues from what an ecosystem and a service could look like. And I was just saying off mic briefly, but like, I do think part of this is linked to Japanese culture, and like, Japan is still a paper-based society. They use fax machines in offices. They are a cash-based society. A lot of Nintendo gamers in Japan will buy games using cash to buy download codes in stores. And this idea that all of a sudden that society is ready to move to a subscription model, like a Game Pass model, is over a decade away. Like, I just don't see, that's just one reason and many reasons that I see Nintendo being the last to the party by about a decade to the subscription model.
Well, it's interesting because they do have a subscription model to some degree, which is their Nintendo Online service. It's the only one that they have, and they brought it in when the Switch started. And you could say, hey, this is Nintendo's version of Game Pass. It's their old games that they're putting on there. And, you know, people have reacted differently to that. It's obviously much, much cheaper than either of their competitors because obviously it offers much less. It's not offering new games on Switch. It's offering old games from a back catalogue of NES and Super Nintendo games, which they always, for whatever reason, they always just lean on those and they never expand themselves beyond it. And maybe you could argue that if they add N64 games, if they add GameCube games, they would have to just bump up the price or whatever of their online subscription. But you could also argue that people would be more likely to subscribe to it if they did that. But then again, a lot of people would subscribe to it just to play Splatoon online, so who knows, or Smash Brothers online. It's for me, I would say that if Nintendo were to approach this type of business model, it would have to be focused on, say, putting things on there but then taking them away. And Sony have done this a little bit with PS Now, where they put God of War on there and then it went away. Or Rockstar did it with Game Pass, where they're like, here's GTA 5, but we're taking it away because we're putting Red Dead on there, right?
One at a time, right.
I would imagine for Nintendo, their IP is far too valuable for them to just say Mario Odyssey is free if you subscribe to this service, because then no one is going to buy Mario Odyssey. And like we talk about how games go down in price and on sale, and Nintendo's games just don't. They don't because they value them and they make sure that they stay at that price. And that instantly undermines that fundamental philosophy they have about the cost of their own games, if they do that. However, if they position it to say, okay, Mario Odyssey is available to play for the month of July 2023, and for that month, you can play it. Once it goes. You can buy it from the eShop, and you can keep your progress. Your save data is still there, but it's just here for this month. And then it's going to go again. And then for the next month, here's ARMS for August of that year. And so I could see them doing it where they put one of their big games on offer for the subscription for that period of time, but in order to maintain that value that they so very obviously covet, they take it away again, right? And they have it on this kind of rotational basis that gives people the understanding that they could play it for a month, but like if they want to play through and never play it again, whatever, then they're going to have to get on it and play it for that month. They're going to have to pay Nintendo the subscription fee, and hopefully for Nintendo, they will stay subscribed, forget they're subscribed, and then give them money for the rest of time, essentially.
If Xbox were the market leaders, I don't believe for a second that they would have all of their first-party titles freely available through Game Pass permanently.
100%.
Which they currently are, right? And
if they had won this generation, if they had beaten Sony, none of the positive stuff they have done would have happened, because, first of all, Don Matrick wouldn't have left, and Phil Spencer wouldn't have been put in the position that he's in, right? Like, fundamentally, you look at it from the perspective of all the fuck-ups they made led to all the positive change. I'm not to say that Phil Spencer wouldn't do that if he wasn't necessarily, but you can't really talk about that future. I think putting his money where his mouth is, if Xbox run away with the next generation and they beat Sony and they're ahead, and then they start to walk back some of these, or they put up the price of Game Pass or whatever, that's when I would question Phil Spencer's integrity with this stuff. Because from what I've seen, he seemed very genuine about like keeping this stuff going and making it a building block, because fundamentally this seems like foundational stuff for the future of that company in terms of their games business.
But when you actually step back and you think, what is important to have to run a successful subscription model like Game Pass? And I think the two things that are the most important are first-party exclusives and a community around those exclusives that are passionate about those games and would be willing to subscribe and, you know, shout out about it on the internet. And I think Nintendo is actually really strong in that aspect. They have really strong first party exclusives. They have an online community who are incredibly positive about their games and are very vocal about it. And when you put those two things together and step back, you actually think Nintendo are actually pretty well prepared from that aspect if they did want to do something that was like Game Pass, where you did get your access to 2 or 3 Nintendo first-party games when they come out, and I don't know how much the subscription price could be, but it does seem like they are just a few important building blocks away from having a really cool ecosystem that would do very well.
Nintendo could do it, right? They could fundamentally put all their first-party stuff day one onto a subscription service. However, the price of that service would be high. Like, I'm thinking $25 a month, right? That is the kind of level I'm talking about, where they would put up a substantial amount of money. You'd be paying a lot a year, but if you're a Nintendo fan and you plan on getting all of the games...
That would still be cheaper for me personally if it was $25 a month. Definitely.
Absolutely, because we spend so much on Nintendo games when they come out, and obviously it depends on the year. You can have a year like 2018 where they barely put anything out and you're still paying that amount, right? But then you have a year like 2019 where the back half of that year was packed, right? Like, Bally, you didn't buy Astral Chain, but if this subscription was going, you would probably have played Astral Chain because it just came onto the subscription. You're already paying for it. You had access to it.
I'm already playing loads of things I wouldn't otherwise have been playing because of Xbox Game Pass. Like
exactly,
that's one aspect that it just creates this idea of trying out games, which I think for an art form that is so based around tastes, I think is really important, where you don't want to, pay up 40 quid and then have a negative experience. But if you're dipping into, say, I played a bit of, what was I playing? Dirt 4. I was like, this probably isn't my cup of tea. I played an hour or two and then I dipped out, and like that is something that's really valuable going into the next generation, that I would love to see more of that ability to dip in, dip out of games from Nintendo. And you kind of get that with the online service they currently have with NES and SNES games, where it's like, that's an interesting game I've never heard of. Let's try that. And if they one day applied that logic to their big first party titles, I think you could see a lot of, progress.
Totally. Like, and we talked about Wild Guns this episode. That's a game I wouldn't have bought on the Wii Virtual Console. I wouldn't have bought it on the Wii U Virtual Console. Operation Logic Bomb I talked about last time. I would never have bought that game of my own volition.
Exactly.
But I've now played them both, and I had a great time playing both of them. Experiences that are new to me, that I never would have given the time of day before, because Nintendo just put them on there, and I've subscribed to this thing, so I might as well give them a shot, right? And you come out the other side more well-rounded in what games you've played, more knowledgeable, all that stuff. I think it's positive overall. Like, I really do like the subscription model. And, I think we're only going to see more of it. So whether Nintendo does it, makes it a more appealing offer in the future, or if they expand out what they're doing with their digital games, their kind of older games, and add indies on there, right? Like, I think fundamentally Nintendo Switch is built on the power of independent games. So if you had a subscription model that tied in the classic games, the indie games, and then, as we said, say like one first-party game a month that rotates out, right? Like that, for me, that is a feasible Nintendo-based subscription model that could rival potentially other businesses.
Totally. So say Nintendo announced Nintendo Game Pass is coming out next year. We're all really excited. We're all very shocked as well, don't get me wrong. And we're ready to pay up day one, get subscribed. What's a big downside to their service, which is Nintendo to a T, that we have to live with and we accept?
The downside is that if you play these games through the subscription, for whatever reason, you can't play with your friends online, even though you're subscribed to a thing that lets you play online. But the loophole is you only get to play online if you own the game. But if you're doing it through the subscription, you have to buy and download the full version. So Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, you can't go online.
8, Super Smash Brothers, Splatoon 2.
They're
all
the version that comes to they're all like nulled because they don't have the online connectivity. You can't play with people online. That is the most fucking Nintendo thing possible, in my mind. Any ideas, Bally?
Oh god, I think that was a really good one. I think that the service has all these modern Switch first party games on it, and all of these awesome indies on it. And then they just lob in NES games and Super Nintendo games mixed in throughout all of these games. And that's cool. I'm positive about that. But then they still don't do N64, GameCube, Game Boy, you name it. Like all these other systems are, we're not doing that yet. When you think that actually that would probably be a really suitable place to put stuff like that, a bit like they're currently doing with NES and SNES. I feel like they could expand in some ways and then still fail to deliver Game Boy Advance games, GameCube games, N64, and still to have such an expansive service that still stops you from being able to play loads of great Nintendo historical games.
Yeah, no, that's very likely, to be honest with you. I wouldn't be surprised by that. So yeah, well, we'll see. I think that, as you said, we're in this transitional period with video games, and you look at stuff like the streaming services for TV and movie, which many people at the current point in our history are very familiar with, I'm sure, because a lot of people are home and a lot of people are watching a bunch of that stuff. And do you know if Disney, like, in the future with their movies and stuff, like how soon they will come to Disney Plus, like after they've been in cinemas? Have they talked about that at all, Bally?
I don't know. I know they've done like some exceptions due to COVID-19, and obviously stuff like I've forgotten the name of that most recent Pixar film that you saw.
The Pixar film, the Homeward or something. I can't remember what it's called.
Bound Word.
Yeah, it's the one with the wizards and the kids and stuff. Ding, ding, ding. Hello, Editing NBZ here once again to tell you the name of that Disney Pixar film is Onward. It's very good. I watched it with my sister. It's a great time. You should watch it. Anyway, back to the show. Ding, ding, ding.
Cannot remember that name for
neither can I.
Yeah, no, I think they said some exceptions, but they've not done... Nintendo. Disney are very careful not to like tie themselves into quotes that get them tied in knots in the future. So I think they've not said anything clear to my knowledge of like where that's going.
Because I wonder about like you talk about the comparisons between what video game companies could do versus what streaming subscriptions are doing in terms of. You have different points of sale, right? You can have the Blu-ray release and then it comes to the streaming service versus you have the day one, you buy it on a disc or digital release and then later it comes to Game Pass, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make the comparisons there because obviously, Ubisoft will not want to just put Assassin's Creed on Game Pass day one. That's not financially beneficial to them because they can sell 10 million of those games regardless.
Ubisoft
right?
are one of those companies. I don't believe they have any games on Game Pass to my knowledge. There's a handful of companies that just you really notice, they've got nothing on here. But then companies like Bethesda, like all the Bethesda stuff to my knowledge is on there, Witcher 3, that kind of thing. So yeah. And all the EA games, they're trying to do their own ecosystem. They're another example. I don't believe any EA games are on Game Pass.
So they've got their own like Origin Premiere on PC and I think on PlayStation or on Xbox actually. Origin Premiere,
and obviously like Epic. So those are three big companies that make big games that a lot of people play that are very distant to everything Xbox are doing with that service. So
even Ubisoft, I forgot. Ubisoft announced at E3 last year that they had their own subscription, Uplay Plus, I think it was. So even Ubisoft are getting in on it. Like everyone's trying to get in on it, and this is the trouble, right? It's like with the streaming platforms, everyone's like, oh, you have to have Netflix and HBO and Hulu and Disney Plus and Amazon Prime, and all of a sudden you're paying so much money that people just go back to piracy, essentially. So if people get it cut off a bit too much, it gets a little risky in that sense.
That's where I would have a lot more faith with an organization like Microsoft, where you're providing the IP as well as the platform, whereas obviously Epic, you can have like a PC-based store, but I think because console gaming is obviously still so prevalent, I think unless you're making your own console, I don't see EA's and Ubisoft's model competing with Microsoft's personally. I just think Microsoft can just say, right, well, we won't put your games on our system then, screw you, kind of thing. Like, I don't think we're at loggerheads yet, but if we continue to go behind subscription services and Microsoft say, hey, well, we make so little money from hard copies of Assassin's Creed being sold on Xbox now that we're just gonna shut you out. And obviously that wouldn't look good for them because they don't want it going over to Sony, but I could see that happening in maybe 5 years time. I could see, but not right now.
Yeah, makes sense.
But yeah, Capsule J, good question. That definitely enjoy kind of talking about streaming services and what's going to happen in the future, especially around Nintendo, and some of their differences, let's just say. But yeah,
foibles.
Thanks very much for your questions, people. If you would like to send a question into this here show, please send them to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We would really appreciate your questions. And as I said at the top of the segment, you can post on our Discord server in the comments thread, in the email thread, I should say. We'd really appreciate your questions there as well. But that's going to do it for the show. MBZ, we've got a special announcement. Do you want to let everyone know what we have planned?
Absolutely. Backlog Club is back in action. We're going to be doing a new one. It's going to be a 3DS edition, which means we're bringing a few 3DS games to the fore, to which people can vote on our Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, any of our patrons can vote on what they would like to be the next Backlog Club game. Bally, drumroll please, what are the games we've chosen for this Backlog Club?
We have picked Kirby Triple Deluxe, Metroid Prime Federation Force, because that is the full name, remember, and Nintendogs and Cats. Plus Cats. And Cats?
Plus Cats, yeah. So kind of bringing back some games that have been in polls before and doing a 3DS focused one. Because, the 3DS is dead, but we have to honour its legacy still. And there are so many 3DS games. Man, there was that Atlas sale that happened where I bought Radiant Historia and I bought like Etrian Odyssey and a bunch of shit for like super cheap. So now is the time to get on those cheap 3DS games. And yeah, we'll put the poll up. You can go over to our Patreon, and if you're a patron of any level, you can vote on that poll and decide what the next Backlog Club game will be. And then we will talk about it in, I don't know, however long time it will take us to play it or whatever. We'll figure that out. We'll let you all know. And hopefully everyone can play alongside with us.
When are we starting the poll?
So we will give you just 2 weeks to vote on this one. So you can, but by the next show, we'll announce what it's going to be. And then we can get on it ASAP and then figure out when we're going to talk about it for the future, when we will be discussing. And of course you can join along with us. We have a thread in our Discord where you can post along as you're playing on Backlog Club, and let us know your thoughts. Send us your emails when we get to that point in time. But first things first, we need to figure out what game we are actually playing. So we'll do that, and that'll be good. Obviously, talking of our Patreon, we have some people to thank from Patreon. Bally, who are they?
Yes, thank you to our $10 tier patrons. They are Atari, Alex, Thomas, Jackpot, and my fiancée Caroline. Thank you for your support. But thank you to all of our other patrons. We hugely appreciate your support.
Absolutely, and we've been getting some new ones recently, which is very nice, and we very much appreciate that. Just giving the show some support. You can support us in other ways by following our presences all over the internet. We are on Twitter, of course. I am at LordNBZ, and I don't know, I'm tweeting about some nice meteor showers in Xenoblade because it's calming and nice in this period of time. Bally, how about you?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. And yeah, I've been a bit quiet recently, so maybe get back on that.
Absolutely. You can follow at TNL Podcast for the Twitter account of us, where you can see things that we're talking about, reminders about Backlog Club voting, reminders to email us, all those types of things. So get on there, check it out. And yeah, you can find us all over the internet. We're on various shows. We are on, not shows, we're on various services. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Stitcher. We are on Spotify. We're all over the shop. Go check us out. Go find us. Go subscribe. Go leave us a review on iTunes. That is very important. That's very helpful. If you can do that, that would increase our visibility and it'll help the show up a huge amount. But I think that's going to close us out, Bally. Thanks for being here, for talking Nintendo, for talking video games. It's been good. And yeah, I don't know. Stay safe out there, people. Do what you can. Yeah, we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. And until then, thanks very much. Bye-bye. The musical interlude used on today's show was Bionis Shoulder from Xenoblade Chronicles Future Connected. Copyright Monolith Soft and Nintendo 2020.